March 1961, Elkhorn, Wyoming. A diner on US 30 at the foot of the Medicine Bow Range. The bank sends two men on a Thursday. They arrive at 7 a.m. Before the breakfast rush. Margaret Kohls is already behind the counter with the coffee on and the first batch of biscuits in the oven. She has been behind that counter since her husband did not come home from Korea. Today, she loses the building. Her daughter June watches from the back kitchen doorway with a dish rag in her hands. 9 years Margaret has run those stools alone. Gone before the biscuits finish browning. In the corner booth, a man in a canvas coat and a plain tan Stetson is working through a plate of eggs. He asked for them over easy. He is reading nothing. He is looking out the window at the Medicine Bow Peaks. Nobody recognizes him yet. Here is the story. Kohl's Diner sits on the south side of US 30 at the eastern edge of Elkhorn, Wyoming. Population 340. 11 stools at the counter, 4 booths along the window wall, a pie case beside the register with a glass door that sticks in wet weather. A hand-lettered sign above the pass-through window, Kohl's, established 1948. A red and white clock above the coffee station, Folgers on the face. It has run 3 minutes fast since 1953, and Margaret has never corrected it because her husband Roy said it that way, and she did not see the reason to change it after he was gone. Roy Kohls built the diner in 1948 with money saved from 6 years driving haul trucks for the Wyoming Highway Department. He poured the slab himself with 2 cousins and a borrowed mixer. He built the counter from Douglas fir and finished it with linseed oil, 3 coats, and you can still smell it on a warm afternoon. Roy opened the doors on a Thursday in April and served coffee and pie, and by Saturday morning, the stools were full of ranch hands and highway crews and the one Greyhound driver who ran the eastbound line and always ordered the same thing. Roy was called up in September 1950. Korea. He was 34 years old. He shipped out of Fort Lewis on a gray morning, and Margaret drove him to the bus in Laramie and stood on the sidewalk and watched the bus until it turned the corner. Then she drove back to Elkhorn and opened the diner the next morning at 6 because the coffee had to be on and the biscuits had to go in, and the highway crews did not stop needing breakfast because a woman's husband had gone to war. Roy did not come home. The telegram came in February 1951. Missing in action, Chosin Reservoir area. The word missing sat in Margaret's chest like a stone for 2 years. In 1953, the Army sent a second letter. The word changed. She put both letters in the drawer beneath the register and kept the diner open. She raised June on the counter stools. June did homework at the end booth through every winter from 1st grade to 8th. She learned to make change before she learned long division. She learned to carry 3 plates on one arm before she learned to drive. In September 1959, she went to the University of Wyoming at Laramie on a partial scholarship nursing program. The rest of the tuition Margaret paid from the register, $40 here, $60 there, in money orders sent on the 1st of every month. In the summer of 1960, the Highway Department rerouted a section of US 34 miles north of Elkhorn to improve the grade. The new alignment bypassed the town entirely. The haul trucks stopped coming through. The Greyhound rerouted with the highway. By October, the breakfast count was down by half. In November, Margaret missed her first note payment to First Continental Bank of Laramie. In December, she missed the second. In January, she wrote a letter to the bank explaining the highway situation and asking for 6 months of forbearance. The bank wrote back in February. The letter was 2 paragraphs. The answer was no. On a Thursday morning in March, 2 men drive up from Laramie in a gray Chevrolet. The man from the bank brings a folder. The man with him brings a camera and a clipboard. The cameraman is there to photograph the property for the listing. He starts outside, walking the perimeter, before Margaret is told why they have come.
The man from the bank sits down at the counter.
He sets the folder between them. He does not ask for coffee. He reads from the top page the way a man reads a bus schedule. Notice of foreclosure. Kohl's Diner, Elkhorn, Platte County, Wyoming. Outstanding balance, $3,100. Property reverts to First Continental Bank of Laramie, pending sale. All operations to cease.
He says the date.
He says it is today. Margaret stands behind the counter. Her hands are on the edge of the counter, the way Roy used to stand, thumbs hooked over the lip of the Douglas fir. The biscuits are still in the oven.
She can smell them.
She says, I have a lunch crowd at noon. Let me work through lunch. The bank man closes the folder. He says the date again. In the corner booth, the man in the canvas coat sets his fork down very carefully on the rim of his plate. He has not finished his eggs. He picks up his coffee cup and holds it in both hands and does not drink from it. He looks out the window at the Medicine Bow Peaks, and then he looks at the counter. He looks at Margaret's hands on the edge of the Douglas fir. He sets the cup down. He does not move from the booth yet. June comes through the kitchen door with the dish rag.
She stops when she sees the folder on the counter.
She looks at her mother. She is 21 years old, home for spring break, and she has the same quality of stillness her mother has. The stillness of a woman who has absorbed hard news before and learned not to fall when it arrives. Mama. Margaret does not look at her. Go check the biscuits. June does not go check the biscuits. She stands in the doorway with the dish rag and watches the man from the bank stand up from the stool. He says they will need the keys. Margaret reaches under the counter.
She sets the key ring on the wood.
Roy's key ring, the one with the small brass elk he bought at a gas station in Rawlins in 1947. She sets it down and she does not let go of it right away. And then she lets go. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The bank man picks up the key ring. He looks at the brass elk. He sets the key ring in his coat pocket. At the corner booth, the man in the canvas coat reaches into his shirt pocket and takes out a small notebook and a pencil.
He writes something on the page.
He tears the page out and folds it once and sets it under the rim of his coffee cup. He takes a $5 bill from his coat and lays it beside the cup. Then he slides out of the booth. He is a tall man. The ceiling of the diner is low, and the room seems smaller when he stands up. He does not put his hat on. He carries it in his left hand, by the brim. He walks to the counter. Ma'am. Margaret looks up. Finest biscuits I have had west of the Mississippi. He says it plain, without performance. Margaret looks at him for a long moment. She has the face of a woman who can place a man in half a second, and she places him now, and the recognition moves through her face, and then gets held down because this is not the moment for it, and she is not that kind of woman. Thank you, she says. I'm sorry about the eggs. I saw you leave half of them. The eggs were fine. I wasn't hungry for eggs.
He looks at the folder on the counter.
Then at the bank man, who is turned around now and is seeing the face for the first time and doing the same arithmetic every person in the room is doing. That your car out front? The gray Chevrolet? The bank man says yes. You drive up from Laramie this morning? Yes. Long drive for a Thursday. He sets his hat on the counter. How much does she owe you? The bank man's mouth opens and closes. Sir, this is a private. How much? $3,100 and some change. How much change? The bank man opens the folder. He finds the line. $3,148 even. The man in the canvas coat nods once. He reaches inside his coat and removes a long brown leather wallet. He opens it on the counter. He begins to count bills onto the Douglas fir, one at a time, beside Roy's coffee mug and Margaret's keyring with the brass elk. He counts slow. The bank man watches the bills come down. The cameraman has come in from outside and is standing inside the door with his camera against his chest and his clipboard forgotten under his arm. June has come out of the kitchen doorway and is standing in the middle of the diner floor with the dish rag still in her hands. 31 bills. He stops. He puts the wallet back in his coat. He reaches into his trouser pocket and adds 2 quarters and 4 dimes to the stack. $3,148, he says. Even. He pushes the stack to the edge of the counter in front of the bankman. Now you write her a receipt. Paid in full. Mortgage satisfied. Today's date. Right here at this counter. The bankman stares at the money for a long moment. He looks up. The recognition has fully landed now, and his face has changed in the way faces change when the world reorganizes itself around a fact. Sir, I'll need to... You have a letterhead in that folder. I can see the edge of it. You write it here, or you drive back to Laramie and you explain to your bank president why you did not write it here. The bankman takes the letterhead out of the folder. He takes a pen from his shirt pocket. He writes standing up at the counter, using the folder for a hard surface. He writes Margaret's name. He writes the address. He writes the amount. He writes mortgage satisfied in full, and the date, and his own name, and he underlines it once. He slides it across the counter to the man in the canvas coat. Give it to her.
The bankman picks it up and carries it around the end of the counter and holds it out to Margaret.
Margaret looks at it. She reads it once. She reads it again. Her hands do not shake. She is the kind of woman whose hands do not shake. But she sets the receipt down very carefully on the counter, and she puts both palms flat on the Douglas fir, and she stands there a moment with her eyes closed, and when she opens them, they are dry. She looks at the man in the canvas coat. Mister. Ma'am. I cannot take this. I don't know how to take this from a man I don't know. You know who I am. I know your face from the pictures. I don't know you. He looks at her steadily. You ran this diner 9 years alone after the army sent you that letter. Your husband went to Chosin, and he did not come back. And you got up the next morning and put the coffee on. He picks up his hat from the counter. This isn't charity. I couldn't have made a single picture since 1951 if men like Roy Kohls hadn't done what they did over there. Every ticket, every person ever bought to see me on a screen, some part of that belongs to men like him. Consider it a debt. Long overdue. Have you ever had someone hand you back the thing you were certain you had already lost? The thing you had already said goodbye to inside yourself? That moment does something to a person. It takes a while before the hands believe it. Margaret is quiet for a moment. Then, you want the last of those biscuits? They'll go to waste otherwise. Something moves at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Wrap them up. I've got a long road. June wraps the biscuits in wax paper. She brings them to the counter. She looks at him the way a 21-year-old looks at a thing that has just changed the shape of her life, and she has not yet found the words for it. Why? She says. It is the only word she has. He picks up the wax paper bundle. Because your mother put the coffee on. Every morning. For 9 years. That counts for something. He turns and walks to the door. June, Margaret says, from behind the counter. Mama, go finish your nursing program. Don't you quit on account of this. She is still looking at the door. This place will be here when you need it. The man in the canvas coat pushes through the diner door and crosses the gravel to his truck. He gets in.
He starts the engine.
He sets the wax paper bundle on the seat beside him.
Then he leans out the window.
The bankman is standing in the diner doorway. The cameraman is beside him. Neither of them has moved. The keys, the man says. The bankman reaches into his coat pocket. He takes out Roy's key ring. He looks at the brass elk a moment. He walks across the gravel and sets the key ring in the outstretched hand. Drive safe back to Laramie. He pulls the truck out onto US 30 and turns east. The Medicine Bow Peaks are behind him in the rear view, and the long road runs flat in front of him toward Laramie, toward the highway south, toward wherever the next picture is waiting. The dust comes up behind the tires and hangs in the cold March air. Margaret Kohls stands at the window of her diner and watches the truck until it is a small, dark shape on the horizon. Then she stands there a while longer. Then she goes and checks the biscuits. Margaret Kohls ran Kohl's Diner until 1974. When the new bypass opened, the traffic did not come back the way it had been. But she adapted the way she had always adapted. She added a supper service. She put a soup board on the wall that she changed every day, depending on what was cheap and what the ranchers brought in. She built a reputation across Platte County that had nothing to do with the highway and everything to do with the soup board and the biscuits and the fact that Margaret Kohl's was always behind the counter and she always remembered what you ordered. June finished her nursing program at Wyoming in 1962. She worked at Memorial Hospital in Laramie for 6 years. In 1968, she came home to Elkhorn and opened a 2-room medical practice in a building 2 doors from the diner. She served Elkhorn and 3 surrounding counties for 31 years. She drove her own truck to ranch calls in winter when the roads were too bad for anyone else. In 1974, Margaret signed the diner over to June. She retired at 65. She died in 1988 in the house Roy had built behind the diner, in the same bed she had slept in since 1948, with June beside her. June kept the diner open alongside the practice until 1991. Then she closed the practice and kept the diner. John Wayne died in June 1979 in Los Angeles. He was 72. He never spoke of a diner in Elkhorn, Wyoming to any reporter or in any recorded interview. No letter mentioning it was ever found among his papers. The bank man from First Continental drove back to Laramie that Thursday morning. He told the story once to his wife that same night. She told it to her sister. That is most of how it got out at all. In 1993, June Kohls donated 2 items to the Platte County Historical Society in Wheatland. The first is a receipt on First Continental Bank of Laramie letterhead dated March 9, 1961. Mortgage satisfied in full. Signed. The ink has faded to brown at the edges. The second is Roy Kohl's key ring. The small brass elk is worn smooth on one side from 30 years in Margaret's apron pocket. The key to the diner is still on the ring. There is one photograph. Margaret took it herself, through the front window, with a Kodak camera she kept under the counter. It shows the back of a tall man in a canvas coat walking across the gravel toward a truck. He is carrying something wrapped in wax paper. You cannot see his face. You can see the Stetson. June donated the photograph too. The display sits in a glass case along the west wall of the Historical Society building. A small card beside it reads, "Donated by June Roy Kohls in memory of her mother, Margaret Ann Kohls, 1909 to 1988, and her father, Corporal Roy James Kohls, 1916 to 1951, Chosin Reservoir, North Korea. And in memory of a man who stopped for breakfast in March 1961 and left the biscuits on the seat." The brass elk catches the light when the afternoon sun comes through the west window. It catches it for about 20 minutes. Then the light moves on. If this story reached you, do me a favor. Pass it on. Share it with a veteran in your life. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. There are more Duke stories coming. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.